bells, but I want to run a mission a yard from the gate of hell.
Hello, Christian Patriots, and welcome to Church and State, where we strive to plug you into the pew and plug you into politics. I'm your host, Caleb Collier. With me, as always, Pastor Gabe Blomgren.
Let's do this.
Yeah,
it
indeed.
Is a great day the Lord hath made.
Indeed it is, yes. It's funny, we've been using this intro song for just a little bit now.
Yes,
and
but
now
we have to give it up.
We're in the hunt for a new one because Pastor Ken, who sometimes comes on here, has actually started his own radio show,
Yes.
And it's going to be called Run to the Battle. And so we're giving up our song for him.
He's got a Sunday morning show, and just want to encourage everybody to tune in. Our pastor, Pastor Ken Peters, who is the senior pastor of Covenant Church. I'm an associate pastor here. He has his own show now every single Sunday morning, and it is a half an hour show. And I'm excited. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'll be great. It's at 11 to 11:30 on KTW.
11 to 11:30.
96.5 FM and 6:30 AM. Go ahead and tune in, and you can listen to our senior pastor, the one that really leads both you and I.
He's doing an amazing job on the book of Revelation right now. In fact, he's never preached in the book of Revelation in all these years, a sermon series. And wouldn't you believe it, the first time he does it, the world starts coming into the apocalypse. So I blame him personally.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. All right, let's go ahead and get into our guest. We've had this individual on before. We were both really taken with him. He's quite the expert, especially in regards to Marxism. And so we wanted to bring him on because he's going to be able to discuss COVID-19 and really what the Marxist agenda is behind it.
Yes.
So Lewis Russo is no stranger to Church and State, but thank you once again for joining us on our broadcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just go ahead and get into this. We were contacted by you, and you said you wanted to discuss exactly what the agenda is. And you can see, as you look around, you can really see that our liberties are being eroded away. They're using this crisis as a model, as a method to take away our rights. And so just go ahead and kind of discuss that with us.
Yeah, certainly. So real quick, just to kind of give some background, a lot of the things that I've discussed on your last episode that you had me as a guest, and then also just in other forums, a majority of the public feedback, we'll say, meaning if you could just take a slice right down the middle, was not receptive to the concepts that I was discussing. And so now I have a feeling that people are getting just a appetizer of what they're starting to kind of maybe entertain the thought that things we're discussing are possibilities. You really get cornered into a label very quickly, whether it's a conspiracist or something like that. And with COVID-19 and the agenda behind it, this is what I do because I'm pretty much a philosophical person. I read the first three philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, and then kind of grew from there. I would say that most of my philosophy revolves around some Eastern philosophies. And that was really more for other reasons than political, for sure. It was me growing up as a young man and discovering the world that I live in, traveling outside of the U.S., things like that. And this is really where Marxism intersected with my life, because it's a very philosophical ideal. Marxism is not just a way of governing a society. And the reason why is because as soon as you go to implement that, that's where you get into the philosophical. I'll give you an example. So with COVID-19, how do we mitigate this without violating the Constitution, without going from being a republic to being, a socialist Marxism or socialist communism sort of regime by the government? Where's that line drawn? And so that's what Karl Marx was trying to do with the 10 planks of communism in his manifesto. He was trying to figure out the proper way to go about doing a bad thing. And here's the problem, because the thrust behind this bad thing, the change, and if you look at Turkey, Russia, Nazi Germany specifically, in last episode, how did this happen? Well, it's for a good reason. So in the name of public safety, in the name of your health, in the care for all of our elderly loved ones and the immunocompromised, we do this. So that's the good engine part that the road is paved with, right? And here's the philosophy entry point. Who gets to decide what the measure is, and to what degree is that measure enforced? And there's always two sides of any concept of Marxism. There's the few elite who are in power and dictate everything, and then there's everyone else. How do I get on the elite side? Or what puts me on the receiving side of that force? And so that's why Marxism will never work, because it never acknowledges the philosophical side of these things. If you notice, everything about do what we tell you, they don't say it from a logical standpoint. They don't say it from a mathematical or a medical standpoint. They say it from an emotional standpoint. People are dying. The death toll is rising. You're next. Don't contribute to killing everyone by walking outside. But this is the reality of the situation. An invisible threat that can only be identified by the government is being monitored. That is the very definition of how Marxism works. How did Hitler do it? This invisible threat. Can you see a religion in the air? Can I look at you and say you're Jewish?
Right.
No, right? So it's an invisible threat from that standpoint. And what was it so threatening about in Nazi Germany that he felt they were the enemy of the state? And that's how they all rallied together as you know, coming in defense of the enemy. And so COVID-19 is really that same thing. And that's what they need. They need a mechanism to emotionally drive society into a state of obedience.
Yeah, this is something Gabe and I have talked about this quite a bit on the show, and we've pointed out all of these wars that we're currently involved with, and the government has really moved away from wars with specific countries, because once you defeat that country, then the war is over. And now so you're seeing war on poverty, war on drugs, war on terrorism. Now we're seeing war on climate change, and now we've got this war on this virus.
Yeah. Now, what's the common denominator from a governmental standpoint, other than the people, of course, when they enact these wars? What is the common denominator? Money.
Yeah.
And what did they just do? $2 trillion annexed from our income. See, I don't like calling them taxes. I like saying it's our income, because I would have made $10,000 last year, but because of taxes, I only got to keep roughly $6,000 of that $10,000. If you're good at doing your taxes, if you just take what they give you, you probably only got to keep 5,000, you know. And then, of course, you're taxed when you go to spend in commerce. If I want to go buy something, there's sales tax on it. So they literally do get you coming and going. And these are things that they've used terminology and euphemism to kind of create that benign indifference that everyone has. I'm amazed that Texas has not called the country to a constitutional convention. I'm amazed that they talked about secession. These are things that tells me there's a lot of complacence going on, that normally there would be major unrest if they would have tried to do this 2 decades ago.
Lewis, you actually, there's a little bit of a glitch here on this Skype call, and I assume that it's because so many people are using the product right now as everybody's trying to telecommute. But you said Texas, you were amazed that Texas, did you say it called for a constitutional convention? I couldn't make out what you said there.
Yeah, I was amazed that they have not at this point called for a constitutional convention, because they've tried before the election in 2016, and Hillary, of course, shot it down in her seat. And I'm also surprised they're not discussing publicly secession from the Union. That is, I mean, we're not at that point yet, and maybe that's why they're trying to kind of, it's like that Mexican standoff where everybody's got their guns pulled, but no one wants to be the first to pull the trigger.
Yeah, it's that sweaty moment where everyone's deciding what to do, and I think we're all waiting, and I say we as the public, and just watching. I think we're like there at the OK Corral, and we're like in the saloon watching the government and then major states like Texas in this standoff. And I think the bad guy will just say the government is waiting for the virus to get worse so they can enact more power. And then the state is waiting for nothing to happen so that they can say, see, I told you so, you need to stand down.
No, and he brings up an interesting point. Texas is really the one state that could pull that off. Number one, they are the Republic of Texas, so they could easily secede from the United States. That is a possibility. They have the economic strength to actually be successful in doing so.
Yeah, we do, though. I'm sure that they're in their party and their people are thinking, if we walk away right now and this virus breaks out, we're going to look like fools. But I think a lot of the states are waiting to see what happens, because like where we live right now in Washington, they are able to hype up with the Jake the Snake Show, Jay the Snake Show. He is hyping and fomenting everything he possibly can get out of this. He somehow has got back into the media again. He just, with his little trendy glasses, Jay Inslee has got his little greasy hooks into the situation, milking it.
And the things that they're banning too, it just mind blowing. You know, the most recent one that I saw that he banned was fishing.
Okay.
So we in Washington State can no longer fish. Now, how is that? Seeing most people that I've seen fishing, you know, you got a couple people out there. There's tons of space. There's tons of water, but no, you can't do that now, according to Washington State edict by our governor.
Plastic bags are a priority.
Yeah.
There's a segue there, though. That could fall under medical ignorance. You know, maybe he truly believes that the fish could spread it, because I catch a fish, I'm infected, I touch it, I throw it back in because it's not large enough. Someone else catches it and eats it. Gets the virus.
There you go.
If that's something you think is plausible, then you need to go to medical school. But I think it's more about curtailing the food supply so that you're dependent on the state to get your food. I mean, if we really want to get, you know, Orwellian about this. But this is the thing that I use to identify and also combat. And this is just a chess tactic. Like I said before, I play chess. And hold on. This is one of my smaller books.
Yes. For all our radio listeners, he has a gigantic chess book about the size of like a Hebrew
phone book.
Bible.
Yeah,
it's like huge.
And it's nothing but chess problems. It doesn't even teach you anything. It's just solve these problems. And so in that line of thinking, I kind of apply that to other facets of my life, especially with, you know, taking care of my family, career decisions, things like that. And it's not to be tactical. It's just to take the best possible mathematical route. You know, for instance, and this is something that's very practical, everyone uses every day, GPS, right? When it reroutes you, it's not trying to make you take more time, right? It's going to find the next most efficient route without a backstop of traffic. And so that's how I apply these things. So I'm being intellectually fair and honest with any concept, whether it's socialism or capitalism. I take all of the data in, and then I sift it through that logic filter, and what comes out is probably your best choice for the best outcome. And that's how you play in chess. It's like, well, I don't want to lose, right? So with Marxism and how they're doing this, all you have to do is apply that logic. And that's how it's exposed. So let's just say that it didn't come from a lab in China, and let's say it was not released deliberately. Let's say it was, you know, some seafood in a market that got someone sick because there was, you know, backwater. I don't know what the specifics are of the tale that's told. And let's say it was accidental. And let's say it was gross incompetence of the Chinese government as to how it got out of their country, okay? Now that we're dealing with it, all of those politics are irrelevant. We have this, you know, threat at hand. So identifying the virus, its properties, how to test properly so that you don't release a plane full of people who have it, but they show up as negative because you use the SARS test, which is a major blunder of the CDC's. You know, that's where we're at today. So I don't even get into those things, and you will find floods of web pages of people arguing those points. That's like me arguing over the bishop you just took off my board. It's like, it's gone. Why are we arguing about this? Let's look at the move at hand and the next 3 moves ahead so that we don't have surprises and we don't get ourselves caught in check, that sort of thing. So what the government is doing to solve this problem. Now, logic says this is not a threat to everyone. This is a threat to the immunocompromised and the elderly, for the most part. And that people, or I should say children, 10 and under are supposedly immune to this. It's very much like polio, but the opposite. Polio, it only affected kids. Adults, for some reason, it didn't affect them. This is completely reversed. You know, we're the ones who are at risk of symptoms and potential injury or death, whereas the 10-year-olds and younger, they're not. So what would that look like if we were to execute a plan? And again, here's where we get into the philosophy of things, because now I'm asking to mandatorily quarantine people without any identification of them being infected, but I'm not going to get into that right this second. I'm just looking at the logic of what the choice would be if we decided to instill draconian measures. So what would that look like? It certainly would not look like what they're doing. A wholesale lockdown of everybody on house arrest. That is not a logical response. The logical response would be that they would, the FDA and the EPA would instill measures. If you want to be open for business, you must meet these conditions. They did it for cigarettes. If you want to have a smoking section in a restaurant, you must put in this HEPA filtration system or you can't do it. So why don't they do this for a virus that's supposedly killing everyone? That makes no sense. Then the second measure would be, if you want to go outside as a person, you have the opportunity to get tested and carry that test certificate with you. Or if you're untested, we have to presume you're infected, so you must wear a mask, because that's the common misconception. You see people wearing masks all the time, and they think they're protecting themselves, and they're not. This is aerosol, despite what the WHO said. They said droplet and contact. 12 independent labs that have very good reason to be honest, because they're rushing to be the first ones to give the vaccine out. So they want to be heard. They did their own studies of P shuttle, the amino acid motifs and template PCR exams on people who were infected, and they said no, this is not droplet. So that means that if you're wearing a mask, you can get it in your eyes. Point is that the masks are to protect the infected from other people, or I'm sorry, they're meant to prevent the infected from spreading to other people.
A lot of people think it's the other way around, that these masks are to protect you. These masks are to keep the germs at bay from the rest of society.
Exactly. That's why a surgeon wears it. He's cutting someone's chest, he's breathing bacteria, or she, and the mask prevents that from happening. So it's to create a sterile environment. And that's the type of stuff, like education like that isn't being broadcast. That alone would probably slow this down tremendously if they would start to, we have an emergency broadcast system. We test it every third Wednesday. Why on earth aren't we using that to disseminate information to the public that says, hey, stop, drop, and roll? And I just, things defy logic, but everything. Lying or being wholly incompetent, take your pick, neither one's a good answer. But when the WHO and the CDC falsely broadcast that it's droplet, that's a great way to ensure it spreads. Because now I'm walking around with the confidence that if I don't share glass, I don't make out with somebody, those types of things, I'm fine, I'm totally safe. And that's not what's happening today. They're not giving that rudimentary level education to the public broadband. They're just scaring the living daylights out of everybody, saying, if you leave your house, it's a death sentence. I mean, that's really much how they're painting it.
They really are, and that's why those of us that are paying attention are asking what's the real intent behind this.
Yeah.
And that really leads us to what they're doing here. They're stripping away our rights, using this crisis really to implement their global tyranny, and that's really what we're seeing. What's interesting is that there is some positive aspects that are occurring from this COVID-19. Number one, you got kids that are now being homeschooled. People are actually starting to acknowledge that being prepared is a good idea. We're no longer
I've
the
seen many
kooks.
posts about the preppers not looking so dumb now.
Yeah, exactly. And as far as the onward march towards globalism, I'm actually seeing that this is going to be a little bit harmful to their plans. It's actually going to push this back a little bit as people kind of get a little bit more national in their thinking.
Now, more to the point of the broadcast today, which is the COVID-19 agenda. These are the three standouts for me. One, they are not providing accurate data medically.
Agreed.
So that's number one. And that allows for people to unknowingly potentially spread the virus. Okay. Number two, and this is probably, I'm not going to get into the details of sources and everything, but I'm just going to say, in my personal opinion, so that's the only weight it holds, I think this is absolute false reporting, but people are making statements on television that are reporters, while they're asking the president questions about Chinese citizens being harassed and beaten and things like that. And this is the way the leftist Marxist media works. They don't really care about credibility because they understand one tactic in guerrilla warfare, which is credibility doesn't matter when you're going to sabotage somebody. So just the fact that they put it out into the atmosphere, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. Now people are thinking about it, talking about it. And so the circulation of the story is all they really want, because just like the Me Too movement, accusation is all you need. Mm-hmm. There's no need for a trial. There's no need for proof. And so the whole Kung Flu thing and the Chinese virus terminology, The woman said, if you listen to their words carefully, there was a report in California about a hospital right near where my cousin lives. She verified that they only had a maximum of 80 patients, and maybe half of those were related to any illness. The rest were all like, waiting for a heart transplant, they were pregnant, things like that. And the article said half of the patients in the 242-bed hospital were confirmed with COVID. Actually, that's not true. And if you read it carefully, all they said were the number of beds in the hospital. It's very misleading. It insinuates that there's 242 patients there. There's not. There's 80. Cut it in half. Only 40 were there for supposed illness. So now we're talking about 40 patients. Half of that confirmed is 20. 20 sounds a lot less than 242. Not to mention, of those 20 people, it was test pending. They hadn't had the results yet. This is personally confirmed with a relative of mine that I'm very close with that has a neighbor who's a physician there. So I'm going to trust that way before I trust this sloppy article. And the people who are local to that area were outraged article, and they're all posting comments. And so that's all this is. It's conjecture speak, and it creates a pseudo reality that feeds that fear. The third standout, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but in that bill of the $2 trillion of our income that's funding it, there was a provision for digital wallets and digital currency.
I knew you were going there.
Yeah, we did. Yep.
I figured that was.
It literally was glowing with a huge, massive spotlight on it for us.
Yeah, that's the aha moment. I call that discovered check. That's when your opponent moves the piece and you go, I see what they're doing. When they move their rook out, there's only one reason why they can get to the back file, or the back rank rather, so that they can, checkmate the king. And it's the same thing when you have that, distant relative that you don't talk to a whole lot, and they call you out of the blue. And the first 15 minutes is all preamble, but then they go, oh, while I've got you on the phone, you know about transmissions, and now you know the real reason why they called. And that's exactly what this wallet thing is. Now we all know what the actual true motive of the government is overall, and maybe even with this event. Yeah. Granted, it's gross speculation, but it's fairly well-educated guessing when it comes down to the timing of things. You can't ignore the timing. And I'm a fan of Heisenberg, but I'm on Einstein's side of the fence as far as that whole uncertainty principle. And there's no such thing as a coincidence. You just don't know the correlation yet. That's how I look at it. And until I see otherwise, that's the way my mind's going to work. So looking at this event, looking at how it unfolded, what the government did as a reaction, and what they're doing to the public as far as information that they broadcast. If you notice, they give us an indefinite date. Now, Ohio, we're on lockdown for another month. And that's confirmed from the State House. Wow. I can't reveal that source, but you can take me to court for it if you want. It's absolutely going to happen. But the dangling carrot is, oh yeah, probably first, second week of April, you guys will all be free citizens again. And it's just, it kills me that anyone would comply to this.
Well, it's the emperor is wearing no clothes kind of a moment. We already are free. We don't need you to tell us that. We know that. Unfortunately, the masses are lemmings and they're just following these government orders.
What do the highways and streets look like in Ohio? Because here in Washington State, on the east side of the state, we are not complying. The freeway on the way here was completely full with traffic. On the way here through the side streets, there's people walking. The supermarkets are full. The coffee stands, we got a coffee this morning. Now, a lot of people who are listening to me, who've been hearing a lot of fear, are going to think we're absolute fools. But the reality is it's not what the media is portraying. I've said from the beginning, it's not the actual disease or bacteria or virus that's the issue. It is the reaction. And I knew that reaction would be way more knee-jerk. So I do worry about the reaction, shipping, all the industries that are connected. But overall, look at our social distancing right now. Yeah, I could actually say that you right here are close enough. No, actually, he's too far. He's through the screen. But you and I, we're not going to comply. Now, we're going to use wisdom. But what's Ohio look like right now? Is it ghost town or,
Okay, so there's some things, it's a funny thing you mentioned that because perspective is everything. I don't subscribe to the concept of perception, that old Sandler sales tactic. Perception is reality, and it's in regards to the client and what they perceive. Well, that is a man-made construct. But the thing about what is actually in the room and you talk, that's perspective. And so I could say a thing, kind of like the Black Lives Matter movement, right? They would post an article, white policeman kills black man. And that's all you know. And that's the only perspective you have on the subject. Well, that doesn't look so good. But let's add some words to that. Multi-ethnic policeman, because he wasn't actually just straight Caucasian, shoots black man running from a bank robbery armed. That paints a completely different picture. And so perspective is very, very important. And in the case with Ohio, I'm not saying it looks like a ghost town. It looks business as usual. It's pretty much normal. But our governor, Mike DeWine, he's taking a very kid gloves approach to this, because we're a Midwest state, which means we're a lot different. We're holed in on the winters. And so we're pretty much, kind of on house arrest because of the snow these times of the year anyways. And not to mention a majority, I'll just say this, I'm not insinuating anything, but I'll just give you the temperature of our body of residents in Ohio. We have a lot of CCW holders. We have a lot of people like in places like Garrettsville that have 20 to 2,000 acres of private property. And the sheriff's department are either related to or very friendly with a lot of these residents. So I think our local government's fully aware that if they squeeze a little too hard, we're going to squeeze back.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is the kind of state we are. Regardless of what our voting patterns have been in the last 4 years, which has been abysmal. I'm very embarrassed with our voting patterns in Ohio because, we're that swing state. So we hold a lot of electoral power. We haven't been using it responsibly, unfortunately. We used to be the kind of backstop for the republic. Like, hey, Ohio's got your back, everybody. And same thing with Texas.
Yeah, it's been under
a little flip.
It's been under attack, Lewis. Hey, Lewis, I hate to interrupt you, but we've run out of time.
Yeah, we've been having such a good time. We lost track of time.
So until we bring you back, because you're going to be a reoccurring guest for us, thank you so much for joining Church and State again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the breakdown.
Yeah. All right. So
I'm really sorry.
Oh, no worries at all, sir. All right. Church and State is brought to you in part by Covenant Church and Mountain View Vital Medicine. Always remember the tree of liberty is most likely a birch, and with that, Church and State is out.
God bless. Hey, Lewis, stay on with us. We got to stop radio. We're on Facebook for a little bit. We're gonna finish your thought right there. Just finish that thought, and then we got like maybe 30 seconds, and then we actually do have to go because we have another show to record. But thank you for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, go ahead and finish what you were saying there.
Yeah. So essentially, everything is being soft enforced. So it's an order from the governor. It's not a directive or a law that they pass through all the proper channels in the House. And it's a strong suggestion. You can be fined up to $5,000, basically a first-degree misdemeanor. So whatever that, would carry in any other offense like disorderly conduct, that's what they would charge you with if you became an issue. Doing your business and being a free citizen, you're not going to get messed with. In fact, if you have expired plates, you won't be pulled over because they know you can't get to the DMV. So they're being very understanding.
Yeah, I was just reading that today, actually. Yeah, everything's suspended, including, and we're going to report on this on the next show, the Real ID has been pushed back a year, which is actually a win for us. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, Lewis, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. I always enjoy being a guest, and I love what you guys are doing here. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, and like I said, you will be a guest for us because we really enjoy talking with you.
Yeah.
All right, take care, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, Trekkie out.
Trekkie out.
Wait.
Oh, look at that.
All right, see you,
See you, Liz.